Today, I will tell you a story that begins with love, with a mother's desire to give her daughter a gift she would never forget. But it turned into the night I uncovered a secret that left me utterly speechless. After Christmas dinner, I wanted to give my daughter a gift she would never forget. I hid in the BMW's back seat, silent, waiting for her to arrive. But when I saw who came with her and what they said about me, my heart froze. Remember to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below if you want to hear more grandma life stories filled with emotion, betrayal, and unexpected strength. My name is Janet Monroe. I am 65 years old, and for most of my life, I believed that the greatest joy I could ever give my daughter Emily was love and stability. Money had always been scarce, but I worked hard cleaning houses and offices, putting away every extra dollar I could. This year, after decades of sacrifice, I wanted to do something extraordinary for her. I had saved up enough to buy a used but beautiful BMW, $35,000. That was not a small sum for me, but I thought of it as a once-in-a-lifetime Christmas gift. Emily had admired that car for months, and the thought of seeing her eyes light up made the strain worth it. After our Christmas dinner, filled with warm lights, holiday songs, and the smell of roasted turkey, I felt the urge to make the surprise unforgettable. Instead of handing her the keys at the table, I had a mischievous idea. I slipped quietly out into the winter night, snow crunching under my shoes, and climbed into the BMW parked in the driveway. I hid in the back seat, my breath fogging the cold glass, my hands pressing the box with the keys inside. My heart beat with excitement. I imagined her squeal, her hug, her gratitude. Then I heard footsteps, 2 sets, Emily's voice, low but firm, and the deeper tone of her husband, Daniel. The doors opened and they slid inside, their laughter not the joyful kind I expected, but sharp and tense. I stayed perfectly still, holding my breath. Daniel spoke first, bitterness dripping in every word. "Emily, we can't keep this up. The company's drowning. I owe more than $150,000, and the creditors are circling. If something doesn't happen soon, we'll lose everything." I clutched the seat, my pulse racing. My daughter sighed, but her voice was icy. "Don't panic, Daniel. Mother isn't as fragile as she pretends. She has more than enough to save us. Her house alone is worth $250,000. She has $70,000 in savings. And the life insurance? Another $120,000 waiting for the right moment. We just need to wait, or maybe make things happen sooner." My blood ran cold. Did she just say what I thought she said? The woman I had carried in my arms, fed with my last dollar, worked 3 jobs to send through college, was calmly calculating my death as a solution to her debts. Daniel gave a dark chuckle. "So you're really considering it? An accident on the stairs? A slip? A fall? No one would question it. People her age die like that all the time." I bit my lip to keep from gasping, my whole body trembling in the shadows. My fingers dug into the leather seat until my knuckles ached. Emily's reply came soft, deliberate, and merciless. "Yes, no one would suspect. We just have to play the grieving children. And then finally, we can breathe again." The words stabbed into me sharper than knives. In that moment, the gift in my hand, the keys to the BMW, became nothing but cold metal. My love had been twisted into a calculation, my sacrifices reduced to a ledger of assets. I wanted to burst out and scream, to demand how she could betray me like this, but I stayed silent, my tears sliding down my face in the dark. That night, hidden in the back seat of the BMW, I realized I was not the beloved mother I had always believed myself to be. To them, I was a walking balance sheet. My entire world cracked open, and I felt myself sink into a void of disbelief and despair. Yet beneath that despair, a seed of something else began to grow, not just fear, but resolve. Because the truth is, once you hear your own child plan your death, you cannot go back to who you were before. When I left the car that night, the chill of the winter air clung to my skin, but it was nothing compared to the ice that had settled in my chest. I walked home in silence, every step echoing with the sound of my daughter's voice, plotting my absence from this world. That betrayal did not just pierce me in the moment. It pulled me backward through time, forcing me to face the weight of every sacrifice I had made for Emily. I became a widow at 32. My husband, Michael, died in a construction accident that left me holding a 5-year-old child in my arms with no savings, no safety net, and no clue how I would survive. That was the first night I realized that grief would not pay the bills. It was survival or surrender, and I had no option but to fight. I worked anywhere I could find. In the mornings, I waited tables at a diner where the smell of grease and coffee clung to my uniform. At night, I scrubbed floors in office buildings until my back screamed and my hands bled from chemicals. On weekends, I set up a table at the flea market, selling handmade scarves, old furniture I had fixed up, even baked goods when I could afford flour and sugar. Each dollar was precious, guarded like treasure. Emily was my only reason to keep moving. Her small hand in mine gave me the strength to wake at dawn and collapse after midnight. Every time she smiled, every time she laughed, I told myself it was worth it. And every tear I hid in the shower, I buried with the promise that one day her life would be easier than mine. There was one night I will never forget. Emily was 15, and her school announced a field trip that cost far more than I could manage. She begged me not to worry, said she would stay home, but I saw the shame in her eyes. That night I opened the drawer where I kept my wedding ring, the last thing Michael had given me. I stared at it for hours, twisting it in the light, remembering the day he slid it onto my finger with vows of forever. The next morning, I sold it for $1,200. With that money, I paid for her school trip and still had enough left over to cover a month of groceries. Emily never knew what it cost me. She only knew that when the bus pulled away, I waved with a smile, hiding the emptiness in my hand. Every sweat-soaked shirt, every aching muscle, I counted as an investment in her future. When she was accepted to university, the tuition felt like an impossible mountain. But I climbed it. I cleaned veterinary clinics late at night, smelling of bleach and fear from caged animals. I picked up extra hours at the diner, swallowing insults from impatient customers, all for the sake of keeping her enrolled. There were months when I ate nothing but rice and beans, just so she could have books and the right clothes to fit in with her classmates. When Emily graduated, I thought my fight had been worth it. I watched her walk across the stage in her cap and gown, my chest swelling with pride. Tears blurred my vision, not from exhaustion this time, but from the sight of my dream realized. She was stepping into a world I had never known, one filled with possibilities that my own life had denied me. I worked 2 decades without a break to buy the house we lived in. $250,000 in value now, but to me, every corner carried memories. The kitchen where I taught her how to stir cookie dough, the stairs where she tumbled as a toddler, the porch where she once promised she would take care of me when I was old. That promise was what kept me going, long after my body begged me to stop. I remember Emily's laughter when I surprised her with her first car, an old secondhand sedan that cost barely $3,000. She hugged me so tightly, I thought my ribs might crack. That moment was my reward, more valuable than any jewel or bank account. I believed her gratitude was endless, that the bond between us was unbreakable. Now, sitting alone in my living room with the keys to the BMW still in my hand, I realized how wrong I had been. The house, the savings, the insurance, these were not symbols of sacrifice to her. They were numbers on a ledger, assets waiting to be claimed. I whispered into the silence. Every drop of sweat I counted as an investment in your happiness, and now you count me as an obstacle. I looked around the room and saw ghosts of myself at every stage. The young widow scrubbing toilets, the exhausted mother stitching clothes under dim light, the woman pawning her wedding ring to buy her daughter's chance at belonging. Each version of me stared back with the same question. Was it all for nothing? Yet even in the heaviness of that night, something shifted inside me. I was no longer just the mother who sacrificed. I was the woman who had survived everything life threw at her. And if my daughter thought she could erase me with a simple push down the stairs, she had forgotten who raised her. My story was not ending on that Christmas night. It was beginning again. I wiped my tears, clenched the car keys, and drew a steady breath. Betrayal had cracked my heart, but it also hardened my resolve. I had fought for Emily's life. Now I would fight for my own, and the world would finally see the truth of who I was and what I had endured. Because I am Janet Monroe. I built a life from ashes, and I will not let anyone, not even my own blood, destroy it. Emily's success should have been my proudest triumph, the crowning jewel of all the years I spent bending my back and breaking my body for her future. She earned her MBA with honors, walking across that stage in her tailored suit, her chin lifted like she was already part of the elite. I clapped louder than anyone in the hall, but even as I shouted her name, I felt something shifting. She was no longer my little girl who once cried when I left her at kindergarten. She was a woman stepping into a world where I no longer belonged. She found work quickly with a large real estate firm downtown, a company known for its glossy offices, endless client dinners, and ruthless deals. I remember visiting her new office once. The lobby had marble floors that gleamed like mirrors, and I could see myself reflected, wearing the same practical shoes I had worn for years. I smiled at her desk, waiting for her to introduce me, but she only gestured briefly. "This is my mom," she told her colleagues, before rushing back to her phone call. I told myself she was busy, but I could feel the distance already stretching between us, thin at first, then taut, then ready to snap. Then came Daniel. He was charming at first glance, always with polished shoes, a confident handshake, and words that sounded rehearsed but persuasive. He worked in investments, though the details were always fuzzy, wrapped in promises of future returns. Emily looked at him the way young women look at men they believe can open doors. I tried to like him, tried to trust that my daughter's heart knew better than my instincts. But when I saw how his eyes lingered on things, rather than people, on the value of a watch, the square footage of a home, the brand of wine, I knew trouble lived beneath his charm. They married in a ceremony so lavish it swallowed my last savings. I wore the only decent dress I had left, a blue one I had mended more than once. I remember Daniel's friends whispering, pointing at my shoes, and Emily looking the other way. Afterward, they moved into an apartment that cost more than I made in 6 months. I asked gently how they could afford it, and Emily only said, "Daniel knows how to handle money, Mom. Don't worry." But I worried. I always worried. As months passed, Daniel's so-called investments unraveled. He borrowed heavily, made poor bets, and lost more than $150,000. I overheard him once yelling into his phone, demanding more time from a creditor. Emily consoled him, assuring him that they had options. When she looked at me afterward, there was calculation in her eyes, the same kind of cold arithmetic I had heard in the BMW that night. But long before that betrayal in the car, the signs of her change had already been planted. I recall one evening when she invited me to a company party. I was nervous, knowing I had nothing glamorous to wear. I chose a simple wool sweater, clean but worn, the kind I had relied on for years. When I arrived, the room glittered with sequins and silk, laughter echoing off chandeliers. Emily's smile faltered when she saw me. She hugged me quickly, then whispered, "Next time, Mom, try something more formal. You don't quite fit in here." Later, I caught her standing with a colleague, her glass of wine in hand. She leaned in and said quietly, thinking I couldn't hear, "My mom means well, but she doesn't belong in crowds like this." The words pierced me deeper than any insult from a stranger. I felt my cheeks burn, but I stayed silent, swallowing my shame. I reminded myself that she was young, that appearances mattered in her world, that perhaps she didn't mean it. But the truth settled heavy in my chest. My daughter, the one I had sold my wedding ring to keep in school, now found me an embarrassment. I tried to brush it aside, but the moments accumulated. A missed phone call returned days later. A visit shortened because of meetings. Dinners canceled because she was too tired. Each slight was small alone, but together they built a wall I could no longer climb. Daniel encouraged the distance. He once told her in front of me, "You're too soft with your mom. You need to think about our future, not her past." Emily nodded, and my heart cracked a little more. The girl who once clung to my hand now listened to a man who saw me as a burden. Still, I gave. I lent them money when Daniel's investments collapsed, even though it left me scraping by. I cooked meals and dropped them off when Emily worked late. I tried to prove I was not in the way, that I still mattered, but gratitude faded, replaced by expectation. What I gave was no longer seen as sacrifice, but as obligation. The cruelest blow came one night when Daniel, drunk on whiskey, laughed and said, "Your mom's sitting on assets and still lives like she's broke. Imagine what we could do if she just let go of that old house." Emily didn't scold him. She only sipped her drink and looked away. That was the night I realized her love had shifted into something conditional, measured by what I could provide rather than who I was. My daughter had begun her slow slide away from me, pulled by ambition, blinded by wealth, and tethered to a man drowning in debt. I sat in my quiet kitchen afterward, staring at the photo of her as a child with frosting smeared across her cheeks. I whispered to the image, "Where did you go, Emily? What happened to the little girl who promised never to leave me?" The silence answered, heavy and unrelenting. And deep inside, I knew her heart had already crossed a line, one that separated love from convenience, family from opportunity. That realization set the stage for what I would later overhear in the BMW. Because betrayal never begins in an instant. It creeps slowly, born of small choices, careless words, and growing distance. By the time I sat in that car and listened to their plot, the truth was already there, written across every memory of my daughter's subtle, devastating transformation. The tension with Emily and Daniel was already carving deep lines in my heart, but the pressure did not stop there. My own brother Mark and his wife Helen found ways to cut me with words that left bruises no one could see. I had always thought family, no matter how fractured, would stand as a shield. Instead, they sharpened their tongues into weapons aimed squarely at me. Mark was 68 now, older than me by 3 years, but he carried himself as though age gave him the authority to dictate what I owed. He came by my house one chilly afternoon, his hands stuffed into his coat pockets, his jaw tight. We had not spoken for months, yet the moment he stepped through my door, his eyes went straight to the framed deed stacked neatly in my cabinet. "Janet," he began, his tone already laced with bitterness, "you've built your whole life around Emily. You gave her everything. And what about me? What about your own brother? Did you ever stop to think that maybe I deserved a share of what our parents left us?" I stared at him, taken aback. "Mark, our parents left us very little. What I have now, I worked for with my own hands. Every penny, every board in this house, I earned." He slammed his fist onto the kitchen table, rattling the coffee mugs. "Don't twist it. You got help when you needed it. You leaned on me in the early years, and now you act like none of that matters. You're sitting on a house worth $250,000, Janet, and you're going to pass it all to Emily. What about your family? What about me?" Before I could reply, Helen stepped in from the doorway. She was 65, sharp-eyed, and always ready with a cutting remark. She set her purse on the counter and folded her arms, her voice dripping with disdain. "You wear sacrifice like a medal, Janet, but let's be honest. You didn't do all of this just for Emily. You held on to everything for yourself and your daughter, keeping the rest of us out. People think you're noble, but I see selfishness." The words landed heavy, but I forced myself to stay upright. "Selfishness?" I said slowly, my voice steady, even though my stomach knotted. "I sold my wedding ring for $1,200 to pay Emily's tuition. I scrubbed floors, worked double shifts, ate rice for weeks so she could have a future. If you call that selfishness, then you don't understand sacrifice at all." Mark sneered. "You think you're better than us because you broke your back for her. But in the end, all you've done is hoard what could have been shared. Don't tell me you can't see that this house could solve a lot of problems for the rest of us." Helen leaned in, her voice lowering to a venomous whisper. "It's convenient, isn't it? You live here alone, clinging to memories when your family could actually use this place. But no, you prefer to play the martyr. Let everyone see how you've suffered. It's a performance, Janet. That's all it's ever been." My jaw tightened, but I refused to let my anger break the surface. This house is not a performance. It's the roof I kept over Emily's head when I had nothing else. It is the proof that I survived, and I will not hand it over like a bargaining chip." Mark's eyes narrowed, his voice almost a growl. "You'll regret this. You think Emily is your salvation, but you'll find out soon enough that loyalty is worth less than money, and when that day comes, don't expect us to pick you up." They left in a storm of footsteps, the door slamming so hard the frame shuddered. I stood there in the silence, the sting of their accusations wrapping around me like barbed wire. My brother, my blood, had reduced me to a pile of assets in his mind, and Helen, who had never walked a mile in my shoes, judged my life as if sacrifice was a game. I walked into the living room, touching the wall with my fingertips. Every corner of this house carried my history. The late nights painting walls, patching leaks, fixing broken windows when I could not afford a handyman, the laughter of Emily playing on the porch, the meals cooked on a tight budget but filled with love. And yet to Mark and Helen, none of that mattered. All they saw was the market value, the equity, the cash they could pocket. Their words replayed in my head. "You're keeping it all for yourself. It's just a performance. You'll regret this." Each sentence was meant to weaken me, to carve doubt into my mind. But instead, it carved resolve. I would not allow them to define my life's work as greed. Still, the cracks spread deeper inside me. I could not ignore the weight pressing down on every side. Emily's coldness, Daniel's debts, Mark's entitlement, Helen's venom. One by one, they chipped away at my foundation, as though all of them together had decided that my worth was measured only by what I could leave behind. That night, I sat by the window, the winter wind rattling the glass. I whispered into the dark, "What have I done to deserve this? I gave everything, and now they circle me like vultures." The words tasted bitter, but they were the truth. It was becoming clearer with every confrontation. I was surrounded not by family, but by opportunists. People who once should have held my hand now reached for my throat. They spoke of fairness, of sharing, of family duty, but behind every word was hunger, the kind that would not stop until I was stripped bare. And though I tried to stand tall, their voices echoed in my ears, feeding a truth I had been unwilling to admit. I was not just betrayed by my daughter. I was betrayed by blood itself. But betrayal has a way of shaping steel. With each cruel remark, with each demand for what I had bled to earn, my determination hardened. They could sneer, they could insult, they could accuse me of selfishness. Let them. I knew who I was, and I knew what I had survived. What they did not know was that I was done playing the role of victim. Their pressure was the fire that would forge the woman they underestimated. And soon, they would learn the cost of mistaking my silence for weakness. The night was still sharp in my memory. I sat crouched in the back seat of the BMW, holding my breath so tightly that I thought my lungs might burst. What began as a plan for joy had become the theater of my undoing. I had wanted to surprise my daughter with a gift that symbolized every drop of sweat I had shed for her future. Instead, I was about to hear words that would erase every illusion I had clung to. The door shut with a heavy thud as Emily and Daniel slid into the front seats, the car filled with the faint scent of her perfume, the same one she wore as a teenager when she begged me to buy it even though it cost more than I could afford. The familiarity cut deep. I could not reconcile that scent with the coldness of her voice. Daniel broke the silence first, his tone low, urgent, edged with frustration. "Emily, I can't keep doing this. The creditors are closing in. If we don't pay something soon, they'll freeze our accounts. I'm drowning in calls. The company's dead unless we come up with $150,000. Emily's voice was calm, calculated. "Stop panicking. You know as well as I do where the solution lies. My mother's house is worth $250,000. She has $70,000 in savings. And that life insurance policy, $120,000. The money is there. We just need to access it." My stomach twisted, bile rising in my throat. To hear her recite the value of my life with the precision of a banker disgusted me. I had thought I was her mother. To her, I was a portfolio. Daniel let out a bitter laugh. We can't touch any of it while she's still alive. That's the problem, Emily. Assets locked away. We need liquidity, and we need it now. There was a pause. I prayed she would recoil, tell him to stop, remind him that I was her mother, not a burden to be erased. But instead, her words sliced through me like a knife pressed to the bone. She doesn't have much time left. One slip on the stairs, one accident in the kitchen, and it's over. People her age fall all the time. No one would question it. The air in my chest seized. My throat closed as if invisible hands were strangling me. I pressed my hand against my mouth to stifle the gasp clawing its way out. In that moment, I was no longer a mother listening to her daughter. I was prey, hearing the quiet plotting of hunters. Daniel leaned closer to her. You're saying it out loud now. You've thought it through. She exhaled slowly, almost with relief. Yes, because I'm tired of pretending. I've given her everything she could want, visits, dinners, holidays, but in truth, she's holding us back. We could clear the debt, start fresh, maybe even invest again. Her death would free us. The words, her death, rang in my ears like church bells tolling doom. I gripped the seat so hard my fingers ached. My pulse hammered, my breath came shallow, and still I did not move. I stayed silent because silence was the only shield I had left. Daniel's voice grew darker. You're sure you can handle it? Because once it's done, there's no going back. No tears, no hesitation. You'll have to play the grieving daughter. Emily's reply was chilling in its simplicity. I've been practicing for years. I wanted to scream, to burst from the shadows, to shake her until she remembered the nights I stayed awake by her sickbed, the meals I skipped so she could eat, the sacrifices no one else had made. But I stayed frozen. The betrayal was too heavy to move beneath. Daniel tapped the steering wheel impatiently. So how long do we wait? Weeks? Months? You keep saying time is short, but time is money. Every day that passes, the interest grows. I need that $120,000 from the policy. Now. Emily's tone turned colder still. We won't wait. We'll create the opportunity. A fall down the stairs, an accident in the shower. It's simple. And afterward, no one will question a thing. We'll grieve, we'll collect, and life will go on. I pressed my forehead against the seat, the leather icy beneath my skin. My heart pounded so violently I thought they would hear it. Each word they spoke dug nails into my chest, pinning me in place. The silence that followed was worse than the words. It was the silence of agreement, of shared guilt already sealed. They no longer argued. They no longer hesitated. They had crossed the line together. Inside the dark cocoon of the BMW, my tears slid down my cheeks, hot against the cold air. I could not believe what I had heard, yet I knew every syllable was real. My own daughter, the child I had built my life around, had planned my end as casually as planning a weekend getaway. I could not breathe. My chest tightened until it felt like iron bands were squeezing the air from me. I swallowed hard, forcing myself not to collapse, not to make a sound. Because if they discovered me now, it would not be talk anymore. Their voices faded into softer tones as they discussed logistics, dates, and diversions. I heard nothing but the ringing in my ears, the relentless truth pounding into my skull. They did not see me as a mother. They saw me as a payday. That night, in the back seat of the BMW, the woman I had been, the hopeful, loving, trusting mother, died a quiet death. In her place, something harder was born. Betrayal has a way of stripping you to the bone, and once you see the face of your own child plotting your end, you cannot go back to innocence. I wiped my tears silently, even as my body shook. I had no more illusions left. Emily was not my daughter in that moment. She was my enemy, and Daniel was not just her husband. He was her accomplice. I inhaled, shaky but steady enough to remind myself I was still alive. That was my victory. They could plan, they could calculate, but as long as I drew breath, I was not finished. In that cold car, listening to their whispers of my demise, I made my own silent vow. If they wanted to treat me like prey, they had forgotten that I had survived every storm life threw at me. I had clawed my way out of widowhood, poverty, humiliation, and hunger. I had built a home from ashes, and now I would survive their betrayal. The night ended with them leaving the car, their words still echoing in the air they left behind. I sat frozen long after they walked away, my hands trembling, my eyes swollen, my spirit cracked but not broken. That was the end of illusions. That was the death of denial. And it was the birth of something they could not anticipate, my resolve. The house was silent that night. So silent I could hear the ticking of the old clock echoing through the walls. I sat alone in the living room, the curtains drawn, the fire long extinguished. The shadows stretched across the floor like they were waiting to consume me. On the mantel above the fireplace sat the photograph of Robert, my husband, his eyes forever frozen in the same gentle smile that had once steadied me through storms. I stared at him for what felt like hours. The dim lamp illuminated his face in the frame, and I whispered his name. "Robert, if you were here, what would you tell me?" My voice cracked. "Would you tell me to forgive them, or would you tell me to fight?" Tears had been flowing since the moment I slipped out of the BMW and stumbled back into the house. But by now, they had dried into streaks on my skin. My chest ached, not just from grief, but from the weight of a realization too heavy to ignore. My own daughter had marked me as disposable, and the man she married had plotted to accelerate my death like it was an item on a to-do list. My brother and sister-in-law had already sharpened their knives, circling me for the value of this house, this home I had poured my life into. I gripped the arms of my chair, staring at Robert's picture as if he could hear me. If I stay silent, I'll die. Maybe not tonight, maybe not tomorrow, but soon. They'll see to it. If I fight, at least I'll die on my own terms. The words burned as they left my lips. Saying them aloud made them real. I realized then that this was no longer about fear. It was about choice. They had decided what my end should be, but I still had the power to choose how this story would play out. I rose from the chair and walked slowly across the room. The floorboards creaked beneath me, carrying the echoes of my past. The nights I had walked these same boards, comforting Emily after nightmares, or dragging my exhausted body after another double shift. Now, each creak felt like a reminder. This was my ground, my life, my story, and no one would take it without a fight. I stood in front of the window, watching the street outside. Snow fell lightly, glowing under the street lamps. It should have been peaceful, but instead, it looked like a shroud. I pressed my palm against the cold glass and whispered, "You wanted me gone, Emily, but you've forgotten who raised you. You've forgotten what I survived to get here." Memories surged, not as soft nostalgia, but as sharp reminders of my resilience. I had survived widowhood at 32. I had survived hunger, humiliation, nights when I could not afford heat, mornings when my hands blistered from scrubbing floors. I had endured loneliness that threatened to hollow me out, yet I stood tall. And now, betrayal burned hotter than any hardship, but it also awakened something I had buried: resolve. I turned back to Robert's photograph, my voice steadier. I can't undo what she's become. I can't stop them from wanting what I have, but I can stop them from winning. If silence means death, then resistance means life, and I choose life. The tears no longer came. My eyes were dry, sharp, clear. I sat down again, this time with a notebook in my lap. I began writing. Numbers, names, dates, everything I had heard in the BMW, everything Mark and Helen had demanded. I documented it all, line by line, my handwriting firm and deliberate. Each word was a weapon, each sentence a shield. I imagined Emily's voice in that car saying, "She doesn't have much time left." I wrote it down word for word. I imagined Daniel's harsh laugh saying, "We need that 120,000 now." I etched it into the page. If they wanted to reduce my life to numbers, then I would use numbers to expose them. As the pen scratched across paper, I felt strength returning. I was no longer the trembling woman hiding in the shadows of her own car. I was no longer the mother blinded by her daughter's smile. I was the survivor who had built a life from ashes, and I would not let it be stolen. I closed the notebook and pressed my hand flat against the cover. "This is my testimony," I whispered. "This is the truth they cannot erase." The room was still dark, but inside me a fire had been lit. I looked once more at Robert's photograph. For the first time in hours, I smiled faintly, not with joy, but with determination. "If you were here, you'd tell me not to crumble, and you'd be right. I won't crumble. I'll rise." I leaned back, exhaling slowly. The fear had not vanished. It still pulsed in my veins, but it was no longer in control. In its place stood clarity. They had drawn their line. Now it was my turn to draw mine. I whispered into the silence, as if Emily could hear me from wherever she was. "You think you can plan my end, but you've underestimated me. I will not go quietly. I will not give you what you want. You will see that the woman you thought was weak is stronger than you ever imagined." And as the snow continued to fall outside, I felt the shift within me harden into certainty. The old Janet, the one who lived only for others, was gone. In her place stood a woman who knew the value of her own life and who would fight to the last breath to protect it. I knew I could not face this war alone. The moment I admitted that truth to myself, one name surfaced in my mind: Clara. She lived just 2 houses down, a woman I had known for decades. She was a retired nurse, sharp as a blade, steady as stone. Clara had seen me through colds, through grief, through lonely winters when I thought I would break. If there was anyone who could help me make sense of the impossible, it was her. The next morning I walked to her house. The snow crunched under my boots, and my breath fogged in the bitter air. My hands shook, not from the cold, but from the weight of what I was about to reveal. I knocked, and when she opened the door, the warmth of her kitchen hit me like a wave. The smell of coffee and baked bread lingered in the air. Clara's silver hair was pulled back, her eyes as alert as ever. "Janet," she said, surprised, "you look pale. Sit down. What's happened?" I sat at her table, my fingers twisting together. For a moment, words refused to come. How could I tell her that my own daughter had plotted my death, that my blood had turned against me? But Clara's eyes didn't flinch. They pressed me to speak. So I did. I told her everything. The BMW, the whispers in the dark, Emily's cold voice, Daniel's eager agreement, the numbers, $250,000 for the house, $70,000 in savings, $120,000 in life insurance, and the plan, the simple cruelty of it, a fall down the stairs. Clara covered her mouth, her eyes wide. "Janet," she whispered, that's monstrous." She leaned forward, her voice hardening. "Are you certain you heard them right?" "I wish I wasn't," I said, my voice steady, despite the storm inside me. Every word cut into me. They weren't speculating, Clara. They were planning. She shook her head, disbelief mixing with fury. "Your own daughter. I always thought Emily was ambitious, but this—" She trailed off, then slammed her hand against the table. "No, this cannot stand." For the first time in hours, I felt something close to relief. Someone else knew. Someone else carried the weight of the truth with me. But Clara's next words were cautious. "Janet, listen to me carefully. You're not safe. If they see even a hint that you know what they're plotting, you could be in real danger. You can't confront them directly." "Not yet." I nodded. "That's why I came to you. I need more than comfort. I need a plan." She narrowed her eyes. "What kind of plan?" I met her gaze without hesitation. "One that makes them believe I'm gone. One that gives me time to gather proof. If they think I'm dead, they'll show their true faces. And then, I'll be ready." Her face went pale. "You're talking about faking your death. Janet, do you realize what you're saying? That's not a trick. That's a gamble with your own life." My voice did not waver. "If I stay as I am, I'll die anyway. They'll push me down those stairs, and no one will question it. If I go along quietly, I'll be erased. But if I act first, if I disappear on my terms, I have a chance to expose them. I don't want revenge, Clara. I want survival. And the truth." For a long moment, she was silent. Her hands trembled slightly as she wrapped them around her coffee mug. Then she leaned back, exhaling hard. "I spent 40 years as a nurse. I've seen people slip in and out of life more times than I can count. What you're asking, it's dangerous. But if that's the only way to save yourself, then maybe it's possible." Her words struck me like a hammer. Possible. That was all I needed to hear. Clara continued, her voice low, deliberate. "We'd have to make it believable. A sudden collapse. Something the paramedics can't question. I know the symptoms, the drugs, the techniques. But Janet, this would mean cutting yourself off from everyone. No contact, no comfort. You'll watch your own funeral." I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of it settle in my chest. I've already watched the death of my illusions. Watching my funeral will be nothing compared to that. I'd rather endure that pain than let Emily and Daniel dictate the terms of my ending. Clara reached across the table, gripping my hand tightly. Her eyes shone with both fear and admiration. "You've always been stronger than you realize. If this is the path you choose, then I'll stand by you. But you must promise me something." "What?" I asked. "Promise me you won't let hatred consume you. This isn't about vengeance. It's about truth and survival. Remember that when the darkness comes." I squeezed her hand in return. "I promise. I don't want to destroy them with anger. I want to unmask them with truth. That's all." The air between us thickened with unspoken determination. For the first time since that night in the BMW, I felt less alone. Clara's presence steadied me. Her willingness to walk into the fire with me gave me strength. I left her house that morning with my head held higher. The path ahead was still uncertain, still dangerous, but I was no longer walking it alone. Clara was my ally, my anchor, the proof that loyalty still existed in a world where betrayal had poisoned my blood. As I stepped back into my own home, I whispered to Robert's photograph once more. "You see, love, I am not alone. Clara will help me, and I will fight." That day, despair gave way to resolve. Fear gave way to strategy. And for the first time, the shadow of death felt less like an end and more like a weapon I could wield. Clara's kitchen became our war room. The checkered tablecloth, the scent of chamomile tea, the sunlight filtering through lace curtains, all of it clashed with the gravity of what we were planning. But that was how survival often looked, I realized. Ordinary on the surface, deadly serious underneath. She laid out a small metal case and opened it with the precision of a woman who had spent decades in hospitals. Inside were vials, syringes, and pills. My stomach turned at the sight. "This," Clara said, lifting a tiny bottle, "will lower your heart rate to the edge of nothing. Your skin will go pale, your breathing shallow. To an untrained eye, and even to many trained ones, you'll look gone." I swallowed hard, my throat dry. "And if I don't wake up?" Her eyes met mine, steady but heavy. "That's the risk. I can calculate dosage, but medicine is never exact. If your body decides to let go, it may not come back." I gripped the edge of the table, the fear pressed in, suffocating. Yet beneath it was the iron resolve that had carried me through every storm before this one. "Then I need to be ready. If I do nothing, Emily and Daniel will make sure of my death. At least this way, I hold the cards." Clara nodded, then closed the case. "We'll practice. You'll learn how to stay perfectly still. You'll train your breath. And I'll rehearse the call to emergency services so it sounds convincing." So we began. The first drill was simple in theory, brutal in practice. Clara had me lie on her couch, close my eyes, and count my breaths. She placed her fingers against my wrist, feeling the pulse. "Slower," she instructed. "Imagine your heart is a drum, but you're the one with the sticks. Ease it down." I inhaled, exhaled, forcing calm through my veins. My chest rose, fell, rose again. At first, every sound in the room distracted me. The hum of the refrigerator, the ticking clock. My body rebelled, twitching with the instinct to move. Clara's voice cut through. "Still, Janet, still as stone. If they come near you, if they touch you, you cannot react. They'll be watching for the smallest sign." I clenched my jaw, forcing myself into stillness. Minutes dragged. Sweat collected at my temples. My lungs screamed for deeper breaths. My mind replayed Emily's words in the BMW. One slip on the stairs, and it's over. That memory kept me frozen, because if I could survive this practice, I could survive her betrayal. When Clara finally tapped my shoulder, I gasped for air, sitting up with trembling arms. "I thought I was dying," I whispered. "You weren't," she replied firmly. "You were learning, and you'll keep learning until your fear becomes your strength." The second drill was Clara's performance. She picked up her phone, pressed it to her ear, and in an instant her voice transformed. "Help!" she cried, panicked but controlled. "My neighbor collapsed. She's not breathing. Hurry!" She dropped the phone, panting, then looked at me. "You hear that? Believable. They'll come fast. And when they do, I'll guide them just enough, but not too much. The rest depends on you." We repeated the exercises for days. Each session tested me, pushed me further. Lying motionless, ignoring the primal urge to breathe deeply, rehearsing silence while my body begged to live. I thought of Robert, of the ring I had sold, of every moment of sacrifice. Those memories became my fuel. If I could endure decades of hardship, I could endure this. But the fear never fully left. One night, as we prepared again, I looked at Clara and asked the question that had haunted me from the start. "What if I don't wake up, Clara? What if I'm really gone?" She paused, then placed both hands over mine. "Then you'll have chosen your end, not them. But I believe in you, Janet. I've seen people cling to life when everyone else thought it was over. You are one of those people." Her words steadied me. I nodded slowly. "Then we move forward, because I won't hand my life to them on a silver platter. If I go, it will be on my terms. But if I live, and I will live, they'll never see me the same way again." The final rehearsal took place in my own living room. We drew the curtains, dimmed the lights. I lay on the couch while Clara checked her watch. She injected a harmless saline first, to mimic the real thing, to let me feel the weight of surrender without the danger. "Close your eyes," she said. "Breathe shallow. No flinching, no twitching." I obeyed. The world shrank to the sound of her voice. She picked up the phone and shouted into it, her words a dagger of realism. "Please, she's gone cold. She's not breathing. Send help now." Even knowing it was a rehearsal, the words chilled me. Hearing someone declare my death made me tremble inside, but my body stayed still. When she hung up, she leaned down and whispered in my ear, "You did it. If this were real, you would have convinced anyone." I opened my eyes, my chest heaving with the breath I had held. My vision blurred with tears I hadn't felt fall. Not tears of weakness, tears of defiance. I had stared down the simulation of death and lived. Clara pulled me to my feet. "You're ready. Not today, not tomorrow, but when the time comes, you'll be ready." I looked around my house, at the pictures on the walls, the furniture worn by years of sacrifice. A strange calm settled over me. If pretending to die was the price of living on my terms, then so be it. That night, lying in bed, I whispered to the darkness, "Emily, Daniel, you think you've written my ending, but you've forgotten who I am. I will not die by your hands. I will rise from the death you wished on me, and when I do, you'll see the truth." The fear had not vanished. It would never vanish, but it no longer controlled me. Suspense hung over every breath, every plan, and beneath it all, a steel-hard resolve carried me forward. The morning it happened, the air in my house was heavy, as though the walls themselves knew what was coming. Clara arrived early, her face lined with worry, but her movements precise. She carried her medical kit, the same one she had used during all our rehearsals. I sat on the couch, staring at Robert's photograph on the mantel, and whispered to him in my heart, "If this is the day I must vanish, then let me come back stronger." Clara knelt in front of me. "Janet, once we start, there's no stopping. You'll feel yourself slipping, and it will be terrifying, but trust me, I will not let you go." I nodded, though my chest tightened with dread. "And if you miscalculate?" Her eyes hardened. "Then you don't wake up. But you told me yourself, silence means certain death. This way, you still have a chance." I stretched out on the couch. The cushions felt cold beneath me, like a slab waiting for its burden. Clara prepared the injection, her hand steady even as mine trembled. She leaned close, her voice a whisper. "Close your eyes, Janet. Let go. I'll carry you through." The needle pricked my arm. Within seconds, the world slowed. My heartbeat thudded, then softened, then slipped into a strange rhythm, faint and shallow. My chest barely rose. Panic clawed at me, but I fought it back. This was survival disguised as surrender. Clara pressed 2 fingers to my neck, checking my pulse, then picked up the phone. Her voice transformed, urgent and raw. 911, please. My neighbor collapsed. She's not breathing. Hurry!" The words jolted me even as I hovered on the edge of darkness. To hear someone declare my death so convincingly felt like an out-of-body experience. I forced myself to remain still, my mind screaming for breath while my body mimicked lifelessness. Minutes later, sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder until they cut through the quiet neighborhood. The paramedics rushed inside, boots pounding the floor. I felt their hands on me, rough, clinical, efficient. A flashlight flicked across my eyes, a stethoscope pressed to my chest. "She's gone," one of them muttered. "No heartbeat," another voice answered, matter of fact. "Time of death, 8:42. The words sliced through me, sharper than any knife. Time of death. My death. And yet I was still inside this body, screaming silently. I stayed motionless, clinging to the trust I had placed in Clara. They covered me with a sheet. The fabric brushed against my face, and the world became a muted blur. Every sound was distant, muffled, as if I truly had left it behind. From somewhere far away, I heard Clara's voice cracking, her performance flawless. "She was my friend for years. I can't believe she's gone." She sobbed, just enough to sell the lie. But I knew those tears were not only an act. They carried the weight of what she risked for me. Hours later, when the official reports were filed and my body was transferred under Clara's supervision, I was hidden away in a quiet room, still hovering between worlds. Slowly, my chest began to rise with deeper breaths. My heartbeat, weak but steady, returned to its natural rhythm. Clara's sigh of relief reached me through the haze. "You made it back, Janet. You're alive." But as relief washed over me, another thought pierced through. What about Emily? What about Daniel? Clara handed me a burner phone with gloves on. "It started already," she said grimly. She showed me the screen of her own phone. Emily had called, her voice left on a voicemail, thick with feigned grief. I can't believe she's gone," Emily said, sobbing loudly. But beneath the tears, I caught it, the flicker of relief. "At least she's not in pain anymore." Then came Daniel's text to her, intercepted through a slip Clara managed to capture when Emily forwarded her tragic news. His words were venomous in their honesty. "Finally, everything's ready. We'll handle the accounts, the policy, the house. No more waiting." My fists clenched so hard my nails dug into my palms. They had not even waited for the ashes to cool before revealing their triumph. My death was their freedom. My silence was their salvation. And yet, unknown to them, my silence was also my weapon. I sat upright, though my body still felt like lead. "They've shown their true faces," I said, my voice harsh, ragged. "No one can deny it now. Not even them." Clara touched my shoulder. "You've crossed the line, Janet. You're no longer their mother, their relative, their burden. To them, you're gone. But to yourself, you've been reborn. Her words struck me with both pain and power. She was right. The moment Emily's false sobs echoed in that voicemail, my role as mother ended. What remained was a woman forged from betrayal, ready to unmask the hypocrisy of those who claimed to love her. That night, as I lay hidden in Clara's spare room, I listened again to Emily's fake weeping. I studied every crack in her voice, every pause too calculated, every word too rehearsed. It was not grief, it was performance, and Daniel's blunt message was the curtain pulled back on the theater of their lies. For the first time since the nightmare began, I felt fury surge through me, pure and unfiltered. They had written my obituary, celebrated my absence, and begun dividing my life as though it were loot. Let them, because when the truth came out, it would burn them to ashes. I whispered into the dark, my voice steady, unwavering. You wanted me dead, Emily. You wanted my silence. But I am still here, and I will use the death you scripted to expose the rot you tried to hide. The sheet that had once covered me was gone, but the memory of its weight lingered. To them, I had ceased to exist. When the news of my death reached them, their masks fell faster than I had imagined. From Clara's safe house, I sat in front of a laptop connected to the discreet cameras I had placed throughout my home. I had told myself I was prepared for whatever I would see. I was wrong. The first to move was Emily. My daughter, my only child, walked through the front door of the house where she had grown up. Her footsteps echoed in the hallway, steady, businesslike, not mournful. She didn't even pause to touch the walls, to remember her childhood, to feel the weight of the place. No. She pulled her phone from her purse and dialed immediately. Yes, this is Emily Monroe. I want the property listed immediately. Quick sale. $250,000 will do. She paced through the living room as though she already owned it. Yes, as is. No renovations, just cash buyers. I don't want delays. I gripped the edge of the table watching her, my nails biting into wood. That house had been my battlefield, my sanctuary. I had mopped every inch, painted every wall, sacrificed my health to hold on to it. To her, it was nothing more than a number she could liquidate. Then Daniel appeared on the screen. He strode into the kitchen, phone pressed to his ear, his tone sharp, almost triumphant. Yes, this is Daniel Harper. I'm calling about the life insurance policy under Janet Monroe. $120,000. Correct. I need confirmation on when the funds will be released. Expedited, preferably. He leaned against the counter, smirking as though he had already won. My stomach churned at the sight of him standing where I had once made Emily's lunches, where I had patched her school uniforms late at night. Now it was a staging ground for greed. Everything's in order? Daniel asked the banker on the other end. He laughed, short and satisfied. Perfect. Then we're finally free of this nightmare. Yes, I'll sign whatever is needed. Free. That was the word he used. Free of me. I felt fury coil inside me, hot and sharp. For years I had seen him as a leech on my daughter, draining her ambition for his debts. But now I realized he wasn't just a parasite. He was an architect of my erasure. The front door opened again. This time it was Mark and Helen. My brother's face wore a grim satisfaction, and Helen's eyes darted around the room like a hawk scanning for prey. She really left it all to Emily, didn't she? Mark muttered, his voice dripping with resentment. Helen walked straight to the cabinet, pulling open drawers with little regard for delicacy. She always pretended to be selfless, but look at this. Everything right here for Emily. Nothing for anyone else. Typical. Mark's hands fumbled with the safe in the corner. After a few moments, he pried it open. His voice rose in triumph. Here it is, $70,000. I knew she had it squirreled away. He held the cash bundles up like trophies, his face glowing with greed. Helen clapped her hands together. At last, something we deserve. I pressed my palms against my knees to keep from screaming. They were dividing me piece by piece, as though I were nothing more than a carcass to strip clean. Emily walked back into the room, her phone call finished. The house will move fast, she announced, her voice flat, efficient. Daniel has the insurance sorted. Once everything clears, we'll be set. Mark turned on her with a bitter laugh. Set for you, maybe. But don't forget, Emily, you're not the only family she had. That money doesn't just belong to you. Helen chimed in, her voice like acid. We've been waiting years while your mother played the saint. Don't think you'll keep all of it for yourself. Emily's eyes narrowed. I don't owe you anything. She chose me. She raised me. What she left is mine. The room bristled with tension. My family, what little I thought I had, was tearing at each other like wolves. And I, the woman who had sacrificed everything to keep them fed, clothed, and sheltered, had become the prize of their battle. Watching them, my heart pounded with a mixture of rage and clarity. There was no love left in their actions, no grief in their voices, just greed, naked and shameless. Helen snatched a bundle of cash from Mark's hands. Take what you can now, she hissed, because once she's buried, Emily will lock us out. This may be our only chance. Daniel entered again, phone still in hand. Stop fighting like children. The important thing is the insurance money. That's where the real value is. $70,000 is pocket change compared to $120,000 in cash. Emily folded her arms, her tone final. This is not a debate. It's mine. The house, the savings, the insurance. I'm not sharing. The three of them glared at each other, united only in their hunger. I sat frozen before the screen, every muscle in my body tense. Their words were confirmation, undeniable proof of everything I had feared. They hadn't even buried me, yet already they were carving up my life, stripping away my worth, reducing decades of sacrifice to numbers in their accounts. I whispered to myself, my voice low and shaking. This is who they are. This is what they've become. But beneath the heartbreak, something else rose, something stronger, sharper. Anger became fuel. Betrayal became evidence. They thought my silence meant defeat, but they were wrong. They had revealed themselves completely, and in doing so, they had given me the power I needed. As I watched Emily discuss sale contracts with the realtor, Daniel confirming policies with the bank, and Mark and Helen stuffing cash into their coats, I felt my pulse steady. Take it, I said to the empty room. Take every last piece you think is yours, because when the truth comes out, none of it will matter. The world will see you for what you are. That night, staring at the screen, I understood that my fake death had given me a gift I never expected. The unfiltered truth of their hearts. They no longer pretended. They no longer hid. And that was the very thing that would bring them down. The deeper I dug, the darker the truth became. Clara had helped me set up call recording on the house phone weeks before. I hadn't expected to find anything so damning, but one night, as I replayed a batch of recordings, I froze. It wasn't Daniel this time. It wasn't even Emily, alone. It was Mark, my brother. His gravelly voice spilled through the speaker, low and insidious. You've got everything, Emily, he sneered. The house, the policy, the savings. Helen and I, we've got nothing. You think that's fair? I clenched my fists, my body tense. The venom in his tone was undeniable. It wasn't just jealousy, it was resentment built over decades. Emily's voice came next, steady, cold. That's called justice, Uncle Mark. My mother only ever thought about me. She never thought about you, never thought about Helen. If she wanted you taken care of, she had her whole life to do it. She didn't. The words cut deeper than any blade. My chest tightened until I struggled to breathe. It wasn't just greed. It was a ledger of bitterness, tallied year after year. Mark scoffed. Don't play the saint, Emily. Don't pretend you earned this. You didn't. You just happened to be her favorite, the golden child. And now you reap what we were all denied. Emily's laugh was bitter, sharp. You can call it favoritism. I call it repayment. Do you know how many nights she spent working late, collapsing into bed at 2 a.m, just so I could get through college? She poured everything into me. You think you deserve the same when you were already grown, already living your life? She made her choice. I was her investment. And now I'm her return. I pressed my hands to my temples, my head spinning. My daughter spoke of me like I was a bank, not a mother. She reduced my sacrifices, the sleepless nights, the meals I skipped so she could eat, into nothing more than financial terms. Mark wasn't done. His voice turned darker. "So that's it? You take it all and Helen and I get scraps? If you want peace in this family, you'd better cut us in. Otherwise, don't be surprised when the truth about how fast your mother went under comes back to haunt you." Emily snapped, her tone laced with venom. "You wouldn't dare." "Oh, wouldn't I?" Mark hissed. "Everyone knows you had the most to gain. If I drop the right word, people will start asking how your poor mother managed to fall so suddenly. You'd better think about that before you try to shut us out." I sat in the dark, my skin cold, my heart thundering. The conspiracy wasn't just Daniel's debt or Emily's ambition. It wasn't just Mark and Helen's bitterness. It was all of it. Threads of jealousy, entitlement, greed, woven together until my life was nothing more than their bargaining chip. Clara looked at me, her face pale. "They've been feeding each other this poison for years, Janet. It's not just one betrayal. It's a web, and you were at the center." I nodded slowly, though rage and sorrow twisted inside me like a storm. I thought I was giving Emily a better life. I thought every sacrifice, every choice was worth it, because she would stand taller than I ever could. But all I did was build a tower for her to look down on me from. The recording continued, Emily's voice softer now, but no less cruel. "Uncle Mark, you can have some. Enough to keep you quiet. But don't forget, it was my mother who chose me. You can resent her all you want, but I'm the one left holding the keys. That makes me the one with power." Mark grunted in agreement, but his tone dripped with malice. "Enjoy it while it lasts, Emily. Power never stays in one place for long." I stopped the playback, my hands trembling. The silence in the room pressed against me. The betrayal wasn't a sudden blow. It had been building, festering, waiting for the moment I was weakest. I stared at Robert's photograph again, my voice cracking but my resolve hardening. "Do you hear them, Robert? Do you hear what they've become? Our daughter, your niece, your sister-in-law, they don't see love. They don't see family. They only see money." Clara touched my arm gently. "This is more than greed. It's old wounds, but that doesn't excuse it. They want to bury you twice, once in the ground and once under their lies. We can't let them." I exhaled slowly, the weight of the truth pressing down on me. It wasn't just Emily's coldness, Daniel's schemes, or Mark and Helen's envy. It was the collective rot of a family that had chosen resentment over gratitude, possession over compassion. And in that moment, something inside me crystallized. I wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. I was fighting for the truth, for the dignity they had tried to strip from me, for the justice that still lived in the bones of a woman they thought they had silenced. I whispered into the dim light, each word like steel. "They want to turn me into a ledger entry. They want to make me the currency of their grudges, but I will not let my life be reduced to numbers. I will rise, and when I do, they will face the truth they buried." The recording ended, but the echo of their voices lingered. It was the sound of family ties twisted into chains, of love curdled into bitterness. It was the sound of a war I had never asked for, but one I could no longer avoid. And for the first time, I didn't feel like prey. I felt like the storm they had unleashed without realizing it. The morning I made my decision, the world outside seemed deceptively calm. Birds sang on the wires, children played down the street, and yet inside Clara's living room, I was loading every recording, every clip, every shred of proof into a hard drive. The betrayal I had endured was no longer just my private wound. It was evidence, and it was time to use it. Clara sat across from me, her hands folded, her eyes steady. "Janet, once this goes public, there's no going back. Emily, Daniel, Mark, Helen, they won't just lose face. They'll lose everything." I nodded. "That's the point. I don't want revenge in the shadows. I want their words, their actions to be heard by everyone. I want the world to see who they really are." She reached into her purse and pulled out a business card, sliding it across the table. "Linda Carson, investigative journalist. She doesn't deal in gossip, she deals in truth. If you want this done right, she's your way in. The card felt heavy in my palm. Linda Carson. I had heard her name before. Stories on fraud, corruption, families torn apart by greed. She was relentless, and most importantly, incorruptible. Later that afternoon, Clara arranged a quiet meeting at her kitchen table. When Linda arrived, she was exactly what I expected. Sharp eyes that missed nothing, a calm but probing tone, and a notepad already in hand. She introduced herself briefly, then leaned forward. Clara told me you have something serious. I don't deal in rumors, Mrs. Monroe. I deal in facts. Do you have them? I slid the hard drive across the table, my hands steady despite the storm inside me. I don't want money. I don't want sympathy. I want the truth to stand where I could not. Linda plugged in her laptop and began scrolling through the files. Her eyes widened as the recordings played, Emily's voice cold and practical as she discussed selling my house, Daniel's glee over the insurance money, Mark and Helen fighting over the savings, and finally, the call that revealed years of festering resentment. When the clip of Emily's words came, she poured everything into me. I was her investment, and now I'm her return. Linda stopped, sat back, and stared at me. This, she whispered, is dynamite. But you need to understand. If I release this, it won't just destroy their reputations. It will expose every detail of your private life. Are you prepared for that? I met her gaze, my voice firm. My private life has already been shredded by them. What's left for me to protect? They buried me once. This time, I'll bury their lies. She studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. All right, but this story needs more than recordings. It needs you, your voice, your face. The woman they tried to erase must be the one to stand in the light. Clara looked worried, but I placed my hand over hers. If I don't step forward, I'll still be their victim. I need to own my survival, not hide behind it. That evening, Linda filmed me in Clara's living room. The camera light was harsh, but I refused to flinch. I spoke with a calm I didn't know I possessed. I told the story in my own words, how after Christmas dinner, I had hidden in the BMW to surprise my daughter, how instead of joy I had overheard a conspiracy, how every word that followed shattered the illusion of family I had clung to for decades. I said the words slowly, deliberately, each sentence striking like a hammer. I don't want their money. I don't want their apologies. I want people to know how easy it is for love to turn into greed, how quickly gratitude can rot into entitlement. And I want those who hear this to ask themselves one question. If it were your mother, your sister, your neighbor, would you have chosen betrayal over loyalty? When the camera turned off, the room was silent. Linda closed her laptop, her expression unreadable. Then she said, "This will air, and when it does, nothing will ever be the same." As she packed her equipment, Clara pulled me aside. "Janet, are you sure? You're not just exposing them, you're exposing yourself. People will know you faked your death." I looked her in the eye, my voice like steel. I would rather be known as the woman who refused to die quietly than as the woman who let herself be erased. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Fear tried to creep in, the fear of what Emily would say, of what Mark might do, of Daniel's rage when the money slipped from his grasp. But beneath it all was a strange calm, like the steady tide after a storm. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt the balance shift. They had the numbers, the power, the greed, but I had the truth, and the truth once spoken could not be buried. The day of the so-called reading of the will arrived, and they gathered like vultures circling what they thought was already theirs. I was hidden, watching from Clara's feed, every camera carefully positioned to capture their faces, their words, their greed. The living room where I had hosted birthday parties and quiet Christmas mornings now felt like a courtroom of arrogance. Emily stood at the head of the room, a stack of papers in her hand. Her voice carried the confidence of someone certain of victory. "Mother left this for me to read. It's simple, really. The house, valued at $250,000, will remain in my possession. The life insurance, $120,000, will be used to settle our debts, and the $70,000 in savings will be distributed fairly. She looked up with a smirk. By fairly, I mean according to the sacrifices each of us made, which of course puts me at the center. Mark leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms with a grin. About time. I've been waiting for decades to hear those words. Finally, I get what's rightfully mine. Helen placed her manicured hand over his and laughed, the sound sharp and mocking. You see? Even saints can't keep their halos forever. Everyone's holiness fades once the money's on the table. It was inevitable. Daniel, ever the opportunist, added his own flourish. Let's not drag this out. The sooner we divide what's left, the sooner we can start building something new. My debts are nearly $150,000, and this payout clears everything. Think of it as wiping the slate clean for all of us. My chest burned as I listened. They weren't mourning. They weren't reminiscing. They weren't even pretending anymore. They were celebrating, congratulating themselves, as though my entire life's labor existed only to fuel their second chances. Emily continued, her voice cool, her eyes scanning the room like a judge. Uncle Mark, Aunt Helen, you'll receive a portion of the savings. Consider it a gesture of good faith, but don't expect more. Mother always favored me, and she made that clear in everything she left behind. Mark's grin turned into a sneer. A portion? After all these years? After watching her pour every cent into you, now I'm supposed to accept crumbs? He slammed his hand on the table, making the papers tremble. I deserve more than scraps, Emily. I'm her brother. Blood is blood. Helen's lips curled. Blood means nothing when it's been ignored. She never gave us a dime, never cared what we carried on our backs. And now we're supposed to clap while you waltz off with the house, the insurance, and the lion's share of the savings? No, not this time. Daniel raised his voice, sharp and impatient. Stop fighting like children. Without my management, none of this will even move forward. Do you think you can sell the house, cash the policy, open the accounts without someone who knows how to handle the paperwork? You need me, whether you like it or not. Emily snapped, her words icy. We don't need you, Daniel. We tolerate you. You think settling your debts is the same as contributing? Don't forget who held this family together when everyone else abandoned her. It was me. If anyone deserves it all, it's me. The room erupted into chaos. Voices overlapped, Mark shouting about fairness, Helen spitting venom about favoritism, Daniel insisting he was the only one with the brains to handle the money, and Emily, my Emily, stood tall, defending her entitlement with the confidence of a queen on her throne. I watched in silence, every fiber of me trembling. It was no longer about me, no longer about love, sacrifice, or family. It was about possession, power, pride. They were tearing each other apart over what they believed was their prize, and none of them stopped to think about the woman whose bones they were standing on. Mark finally leaned forward, his voice low but dripping with venom. Do you really think you can hold it all, Emily? Do you think the rest of us will let you walk away with everything while we're left starving? Be careful. Greed has a way of making enemies out of allies. Helen's laughter followed, cruel and certain. Everyone gets brought down eventually. No one keeps control forever. So enjoy your moment, Emily, because when the dust settles, it won't be you holding the crown. Emily's chin lifted, her eyes blazing. You can fight me, threaten me, hate me, but it won't change the facts. The papers are here, the assets are mine, and Mother made her choice a long time ago. Her words echoed through the room, final and sharp. For a moment, silence fell. Thick, charged, dangerous. And then, as they all sat back, smirking or seething, I realized the truth. They had written their own downfall. In their arrogance, they had exposed themselves, every greedy word, every bitter accusation captured by the cameras Clara and I had placed. Their pride had become their noose, and they didn't even know it. I whispered to myself, steady, calm. Keep talking, keep celebrating, because soon the world will hear every word you've said, and then you'll understand what justice looks like. The day of reckoning came faster than any of them imagined. The living room where they had so arrogantly divided my life was packed again. But this time, not with greedy relatives. This time, it was with the press and the police. Clara stood beside me, her hand steady on my arm, while Linda Carson adjusted the small camera she had clipped to her jacket. The red light blinked. We were live. I took a breath and stepped into the room. The look on their faces was worth every moment of pain I had endured. Emily's eyes widened in horror, her mouth opening as if she had seen a ghost. Daniel staggered back, nearly dropping his phone. Mark froze, his knuckles white around the bundle of cash he was clutching. Helen gasped, her face pale, before she snarled like a cornered animal. Emily's voice cracked as she screamed, "Mother, you're supposed to be dead!" I stood tall, my voice steady, carrying across the room. "No, Emily, I am very much alive. But your compassion, your loyalty, your humanity, those died a long time ago." Gasps echoed from the journalists gathered behind Linda. Their cameras flashed, capturing every word, every flicker of guilt and panic on my family's faces. Linda raised her microphone. "For the record, Mrs. Monroe, are you confirming you faked your death to expose this conspiracy?" I turned to her, my chin high. I did what I had to do to survive. And in doing so, I learned the truth. My daughter, my son-in-law, my own brother and sister-in-law, they plotted to profit from my death. They were ready to sell my home for $250,000, to cash in my insurance for $120,000, to empty my savings of $70,000. They celebrated while I was supposedly lying in a grave. The officers moved forward, their badges gleaming under the lights. One of them spoke firmly. "We have evidence of conspiracy to commit insurance fraud, attempted financial exploitation, and collusion to misappropriate estate assets. You are all under investigation, effective immediately." Daniel's face turned red. "This is insane! You can't prove anything!" Linda's calm voice cut him off. "We have hours of recordings. Every word you said was captured. Every text message, every phone call, every plan. And now the world is watching." The camera swiveled toward Emily. She stammered, her hands shaking. "Mother, please. You don't understand. We were desperate. We didn't mean—" I silenced her with a single look. My voice was sharper than I intended, but it carried the weight of every sleepless night, every betrayal I had endured. "You didn't mean to? You sat in that BMW after Christmas dinner and spoke of me like I was already buried. You called my sacrifices an investment and my life a return. You looked at me as numbers, not blood." "Don't you dare tell me you didn't mean it!" Helen sneered, trying to regain ground. "Oh, save the theatrics, Janet. Everyone wants their share. You were no saint, keeping everything to yourself." I turned on her, my fury controlled but undeniable. Keeping everything to myself? I gave Emily every chance, every dollar I could scrape together, every ounce of strength I had left. And you? What did you give me, Helen? Except bitterness and demands? You and Mark wanted a house you never earned, money you never worked for, and recognition you never deserved. Mark finally spoke, his voice trembling with both rage and fear. "We only wanted what was fair." I stepped closer, my voice dropping to a cold whisper that carried through the room. "Fair? Fair is working 3 jobs to raise a child alone after losing your husband at 32. Fair is pawning your wedding ring for $1,200 so your daughter can attend college. Fair is keeping a roof over her head while the world tried to strip it away. You wouldn't know fair if it was carved into your skin." The officers moved in, placing handcuffs on Daniel first. He protested, his voice shrill. "This isn't justice. This is entrapment." One officer replied firmly, "No, this is accountability." Helen screamed as they bound her wrists, while Mark slumped into his chair, defeated. Emily, tears streaking down her face, collapsed to her knees. "Mother, please don't let them do this. I'm your daughter. You can't let them take me away." I looked down at her, my heart breaking even as my resolve hardened. You were my daughter, Emily. But the moment you plotted my death, you became something else entirely. This is not my doing. This is yours. Linda's voice rang out above the chaos. Ladies and gentlemen, you are witnessing the truth as it unfolds. Betrayal, greed, and conspiracy, all exposed because one woman refused to stay silent. Mrs. Monroe, what do you want people watching right now to take away from this? I faced the cameras, my voice steady, unwavering. I want them to remember that family is not defined by blood alone. It is defined by loyalty, by gratitude, by love. Without those things, blood is nothing but water. And I want every person watching to ask themselves, if you had a mother like me, would you have chosen betrayal over honor? The room erupted as the officers led my family out, their protests drowned by the flash of cameras and the murmur of journalists. I stood in the center of it all, not triumphant, not vengeful, but unshaken. For the first time in years, I felt free, not because justice had punished them, but because the truth had been spoken. When the dust settled, I stood in the ruins of what had once been my life. My daughter was gone, my brother and sister-in-law disgraced, and the house I had poured my soul into was nothing more than evidence in a trial. For days, the weight of it threatened to crush me. But then, slowly, I realized something powerful. Their betrayal had freed me. For the first time, I was no longer bound to their expectations, their greed, or their demands. I was free to choose what kind of life I wanted to live. I made the decision that surprised even Clara. I sold the house, the place where joy and sorrow had intertwined for decades. The realtor handed me the check for $250,000, and I felt no regret, only release. That house had been my prison as much as my refuge, and I no longer needed to cling to walls that had witnessed so much pain. Instead, I took that money and created something new, a foundation for single mothers struggling to raise their children alone, just as I had once done. I named it after Robert, my late husband, who had always believed that love should leave a legacy. The fund grew quickly. People donated after hearing my story, moved not only by the betrayal I had endured, but by the resilience I had found in its aftermath. One afternoon, Clara and I sat in a community garden that had been built with some of the foundation's money. Flowers of every color bloomed around us, and the laughter of children filled the air. I watched a young mother help her little boy chase a ball, her eyes tired but proud. That sight made my chest ache, not with sorrow, but with recognition. I had been her once. I knew the struggle. And now I was helping her carry it. Clara leaned back on the bench, smiling softly. "You've done it, Janet. You turned the ugliest chapter of your life into something beautiful." I shook my head gently. "Not beautiful? Necessary? I could have spent the rest of my days drowning in anger, plotting revenge. But that would have made me no better than them. What they tried to kill in me wasn't just my body. It was my faith in love, in people, in family. If I let that die, then they would have won." We sat in silence for a while, the air sweet with the scent of roses. A group of children ran past us, their laughter like music. One little girl stopped, her hair in pigtails, and handed me a daisy she had plucked. "For you, Grandma," she said with a grin before darting off again. I held that flower in my hand, tears stinging my eyes. Clara watched me closely, her voice low. "Does it hurt less now?" I nodded slowly. "Yes, because I understand now that family isn't always blood. Sometimes family is the people who choose to stand with you, to lift you up when the world tries to tear you down. Clara, you are more my sister than Helen ever was." That little girl with the daisy, she gave me more love in a second than Emily gave me in years. The words surprised me even as they left my lips. I didn't say them with bitterness, but with clarity. The truth had finally set me free. Later, as the sun dipped behind the trees, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Clara asked me what I would say to Emily if I had one last chance. I thought for a long time before answering. I would tell her that money is fleeting, houses crumble, Insurance policies expire. But love, once broken, is almost impossible to rebuild. I gave her everything I had, not because I expected repayment, but because I believed she would one day pass that love forward. Instead, she turned it into a transaction, and that is the saddest part of all. Clara reached over and squeezed my hand. Then your foundation is your answer. You're giving that love forward, even if she couldn't. The garden grew quieter as the children went home with their mothers, leaving the air calm, almost sacred. I felt peace wash over me, a peace I hadn't known in years. I looked at Clara and said the words I wanted the world to remember. Family isn't defined by blood. It is defined by love and by choice. And when betrayal shatters what you thought you knew, you don't have to carry that bitterness forever. You can turn it into something that heals others. That is the only way to truly win. Clara smiled, her eyes shining with pride. You've become more than a survivor, Janet. You've become a teacher. I breathed in the scent of the flowers, the sound of children's laughter still echoing in my ears, and I felt something inside me settle. My story had begun with shock, betrayal, and pain, but it ended here, in a garden, with hope blooming where despair once lived. I knew the scars would never fade completely, but they no longer defined me. What defined me now was the choice I had made, not to be consumed by hatred, but to transform betrayal into a legacy of love, and that, I realized, was the truest justice of all.